But what we want to hear is what the King's going to say, those new draft laws that the Labour government wants to bring in. One is expected to re-nationalise the railways by 2029 under a new public body named Great British Railways. So most existing railway contracts are set to expire by the end of next year. And while some extend into the 2030s, senior Labour sources suggested that the government could take advantage of some break clauses to bring the services back into public ownership sooner. Somebody who we assume will be delighted by this news is Ellie Harrison, founder of the campaign group Bring Back British Rail. What are you expecting today? Is this something that you have been hoping for, Ellie?
Hi there, thanks for having me on. Yes, of course it is. The campaign was set up, almost 15 years ago to the day, to popularise the idea of bringing the railways back into public ownership, and very much from a passenger perspective. I wasn't at that point a railway expert. I was just somebody who didn't have a car and relied on trains and buses to get around. And it was really clear to me that the system was broken. Because it was unreliable, it was expensive, and it was inefficient. And lots of the reasons for that was the blame could be pointed at privatisation and the fact that the system had been fragmented, broken up, and you had lots of different competing operators. So it's taken a while to get this idea into the mainstream, but we're absolutely delighted that it is now the Labour Party policy, and of course they are in government, and fingers crossed that this legislation will appear in the King's Speech today, because it just makes sense to have a public body, something that can be a guiding mind, as it's referred to, as Labour are calling it, a directing mind, which can actually plan and coordinate the railways to work in the public interest. That is what we've been lacking since the privatisation of British Rail. And I really hope that this legislation is going to do what we need to reunify the railways and make them run in the passengers' interest as a public service, because it's vital for delivering economic growth, getting people to work, getting people to college, getting them to family and friends, and of course, cutting carbon emissions and encouraging more people to use sustainable forms of travel.
Ellie, we don't know the ins and outs of what's going to be announced, but just to play devil's advocate for just 1 second, the train network does work well for lots of people, I would argue, and all those companies that run the various bits of the track in the UK do employ lots of people who are very happy to work for a private company. Is there not a fear that this could upend actually a system that is quite well established?
Well, I mean, it hasn't been established that long. Let's remember, it was only 1994 that the railways were privatised, and at that point, we had the rail infrastructure privatised as well as Railtrack, which of course led to lots of horrific accidents in the late 90s and early 2000s, and the previous Labour government had to re-nationalise Railtrack and turn it into Network Rail. Unfortunately, the safety record has improved a lot since then. So the system it hasn't been working, and the Conservatives themselves acknowledge that. So in 2018, I think it was Chris Grayling at the time commissioned Keith Williams to do a review of the railways, which was then published in 2021 as the William Schatz Plan for Rail. And it was actually that proposed setting up a new public body called Great British Railways that could begin to reunify the railways. The one thing that Labour is doing that is different from that plan is also bringing all of the train operators into public ownership. And it would be really a missed opportunity not to do that, because all of the contracts end, as you identified in your introduction, within this next parliamentary term. So it will cost absolutely nothing to bring them back into public ownership. And what we really need is all elements of the railways. It was mad to split it up into so many different competing private companies in that 1993 Railways Act. We need to get all of those elements of the railway working together so that you can provide a coordinated service, get from one part of Britain to another. And as I said at the beginning, this is very much coming from a passenger perspective. I actually live in Scotland. I've got family in London. I'm often travelling to different parts of Britain. And if you need to change trains at the moment between two different private companies, it can be an absolute nightmare if one of them is delayed. And our railways are incredibly expensive at the moment. There's no incentive for people to choose to take the train rather than a short haul flight, which is obviously a lot worse for our environment, or driving. So we need to turn that around. We need to make the cost of fares a lot cheaper and to encourage more people to use the railways. And then, of course, to use that money and other public investment to expand and improve the railways so that they can become the driver of economic growth that we want to see.
Ellie, great to talk to you. Let's see what happens a bit later. The King's speech expected from 11:30. We will see exactly what he is going to spell out regarding the railways. That is Ellie Harrison, founder of the Bring Back British Rail campaign.